Yeah, so it's really not something completely different. It's intimately, like beautifully by chance, deeply connected with what Andy has just been saying. Yeah, so this is it's a very personal response to the theme extinction, evolution or extinction. Yeah, and when thinking about that theme, for me, it fits very beautifully with my personal journey over the last year, kind of measured by Buddhafield to Buddhafield, my last year. And yeah, I'm just wanting to name now that I'm talking just from myself. Yeah, and that for me, there's an inherent power dynamic when one person has a platform to speak from, no matter how sure of themselves they sound. So this is my personal take with no shoulds in it. Yeah, so I'd like to talk about my experience of connecting with my grief, and that being a deeply empowering catalyst for my being able to be active and in service in the world. And that connecting with that grief was hard sometimes, but didn't feel like despair to me. It felt like opening and like release and like something really deeply truthful. Yeah, so this time last year, I can remember sitting in the airfield trying to get internet signal, and getting an email from a charity that had funding for people to have some training at Eco-Dharma, which is a centre in Spain. And the training was for activists to look at the tools that Buddhism can offer in sort of personal resourcing. And yeah, that felt like a really exciting offer. And there were three things going on for me at that time. I didn't feel like an activist. I felt all the time on that course where I was shadow facilitating, I felt like a fraud. Yeah, I had imposter syndrome. I didn't feel that I'd ever managed to be active in the way that I wanted to be. I'd been looking for the perfect way to make the biggest difference. Yeah, so that was going on for me. Yeah, and I hadn't been in touch with grief, really feeling grief, since I was a young child. So I have a very clear memory of being about 6 or 7 maybe, and being taken to a fireworks display and seeing the fireworks in the sky, and hearing the oohs and the ahs and the enjoyment. And then as people walked away, seeing the smoke that was left behind, and having quite I'm sure I wasn't thinking about it in these terms at that age, but having quite an intuitive sense that something wasn't right there, that we'd left behind a mess for something frivolous and not satisfying. Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't thinking about it like that, but I remember the feeling of that. And that's the last time I remember really being like emotionally in touch with that kind of grief. I've had an intellectual understanding of that since, and a desire to, from a lot of shoulds probably, and from a lot of guilt, to be active, but not that real connection. And the third thing that was going on when I got that email was a very kind of I-centered, well, I think my skill set lies in facilitation and people, and I would like to carve a career for myself. How shall I do that? How shall I make that happen? Yeah. So those things were going on, and in the last year, I feel like all of those areas have had a real transformation. So it was at Eco-Dharma when I went on that course that I heard the Shambhala warrior mind training for the first time, and I'd like to read. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'd like to read some short pieces to you. So this is by Apuka. It was written in 2005 with gratitude to Joanna Macy. Yeah, so 2 Buddhists. Firmly establish your intention to live your life for the healing of the world. Be conscious of it, honour it, nurture it every day. Be fully present in our time. Find the courage to breathe in the suffering of the world. Allow peace and healing to breathe out through you in return. Do not meet power on its own terms. See through to its real nature, mind and heart made. Simplify. Clear away the dead wood in your life. Look for the heartwood and give it the first call on your time, the best of your energy. Put down the leaden burden of saving the world alone. Join with others of like mind. Align yourself with the forces of resolution. Hold in a single vision, in the same thought, the transformation of yourself and the transformation of the world. Live your life around that edge, always keeping it in sight. Train in non-violence of body, speech and mind, with great patience with yourself. Learn to make beautiful each action, word and thought. And there's lots more. And again, so hearing that at Eco Dharma again in the last year, I feel like that's just really come into focus for me. So then in October, I went to the Heading for Extinction talk that's been written by Extinction Rebellion. And I heard Larch speak. And felt like, so that talk has some stages in it. It talks very bluntly about the climate crisis and ecological crisis that we're facing. I'm not going to say any more about that, apart from to say the thing that's really stabbed me recently is that all through June there were wildfires burning in the Arctic. So I think I heard the scale of that complete in one go for the first time in years, and really, for some reason in that moment, and I can't quite say why, really let it in. And then the talk also talks about Extinction Rebellion's approach to regenerative culture. So to have a practice together of simultaneously trying to build the culture that we want to see, or build our way of being together that's going to take us through what's coming. And lastly, that talk talks about the theory of change that Extinction Rebellion has, which is this beautiful marriage, this pertinent marriage for me of non-violence with civil disobedience, including, for some people who are able, who have that privilege, arrest and short-term imprisonment. With using a lot of looking back at how social changes happen through history. So, for example, the civil rights movement in America, or the suffragettes. And during at different points in that talk, there's an invitation to the audience to turn to the person next to them and talk about how they've been impacted by what they've heard. And the friend that I was with, we turned to each other and sat for a minute that we were given and just cried, because it felt like the most honest expression of being able to let all of that in and really feel all of that. So I'd also like to read, just going to check the time. A little piece from the Extinction Rebellion Declaration of Rebellion, which summarises that a little bit, what I've just said. We hold the following to be true. This is our darkest hour. Humanity finds itself embroiled in an event unprecedented in its history, one which, unless immediately addressed, will catapult us further into the destruction of all we hold dear, this nation, its peoples, our ecosystems, and the future of generations to come. The science is clear. We are in the 6th mass extinction event, and we will face catastrophe if we do not act swiftly and robustly. Biodiversity is being annihilated around the world. Our seas are poisoned, acidic and rising. Flooding and desertification will render vast tracts of land uninhabitable and lead to mass migration. Our air is so toxic that the United Kingdom is breaking the law. It harms the unborn whilst causing tens of thousands to die. The breakdown of our climate has begun. There will be more wildfires, unpredictable superstorms, increasing famine, and untold drought as food supplies and fresh water disappear. In accordance with these values, the virtues of truth and the weight of scientific evidence, we declare it our duty to act on behalf of the security and well-being of our children, our communities, and the future of the planet itself. We, in alignment with our consciences and our reasoning, declare ourselves in rebellion against our government and the corrupted, inept institutions that threaten our future. Yeah, so having come really fully powerfully into contact with that grief, for me, what Extinction Rebellion then very skillfully did is offer me a clear way forward to bring myself and my skills with support, and to have those skills strengthened and to learn and to grow and to do that in service of something that feels so deeply meaningful to me. And that was a completely new experience for me. So an ability to suddenly to be able to step up from somewhere quite naturally instead of from somewhere guilty and shameful. Like a really active recognition of the privileges that I hold that allow me to do that and that make it an honour for me to be able to do that. And hopefully with a kind of coming back to an awareness of ego, of not being led by ego or not being led by a kind of self-worth, doing, saving dynamic. I felt very supported in that. And that experience culminated for me in the occupation of Waterloo Bridge as part of the International Rebellion in April, where a community of rebels closed off that bridge to transport and populated it with green things, and we had community meetings, and we had a team organising recycling, and we had a skate ramp, and people came and gave their time and donated money and chipped in where they could and made a children's area, and the church down the road offered us somewhere to sleep and wash and use the toilet. It was for me that was a living example of what really deep non-violence can feel like. I've got a definition that was written for me by Alex Toogood, who's a dear friend, inspired, I think, by Charles Eisenstein. The original violence is the distinction between us and them, where we are the holders of righteousness. Non-violence is the recognition that any system is a fluid, evolving process within which every individual is an integrated agent of change. And Waterloo Bridge to me felt like a living example of that, proof of that. And for me, it was also like this incredible freedom. I don't have to align, my privilege, I don't have to align myself with anything that isn't serving us. I don't have to align myself with the laws of this country. Again, my privilege, I don't have to align myself with a job that doesn't fully bring meaning to my life and feel like it aligns with my values and with values that are going to support us all and support every creature on this earth. I don't have to align myself with companies that ignore the peril that we're in, or that are part of these institutions. And that's not personal. So that dynamic's going on inside me. It's my personal journey, and I'm so far from perfect, and XR is so far from perfect, and I crave coffee, and it's an ongoing personal journey, and I've found ways to be in touch with that through the years. But now also it can be a really externally active thing in what I how we are together actively, as a community. Every time you move, I'm like, the time. Cool. So that felt, and I could see the impact of that. I could see the impact of that in the conversations that we were having on the bridge, in the awareness of people we were talking to, in the media, in the conversations that happened immediately after with politicians, in the declaration of climate emergency. I could feel the impact of that. It felt like popping through the looking glass into freedom. Into more freedom. So when it was clear that the police were going to clear the bridge on that final day, I think we were there for 9 days. And when it was really clear on that last day, all the tents were gone, and it was really clear that they were just going to clear the bridge. It felt like the most spiritual, clear experience of my life, to be able to lie down and be arrested in kind of complete calm and peace. So for me, in the last year, there's been a huge amount of personal evolution that I don't feel that I've had to strive for. I feel that it's grown naturally out of the glory of being in touch with my grief, and through that grief, looking in the face of the possibility of our extinction and all the beings that we're taking with us, now. I had a conversation with a friend a couple of days ago, and they were saying that for them the journey is learning to be with the pain in the world, and that will always be there, and the suffering will always be there. And I really hear that, and that's so integral. And for me, there's an addition of with that sitting with. There's such power, there's such personal power for each of us. So I'd like to finish with another Alex quote. We do not have to engage with environmental activism because we should, or because we're right, or because we're responsible. We can engage because it's beautiful to engage.